So why don't we have everybody take their seats? I'll be like the airlines, we can't take off until everybody gets seated. First of all, I was a little nervous when I first came into the room. There was absolutely nobody in the room, so I think we're all pretty happy that you're spending probably the last session with us here. Hopefully you got all caffeinated before the session. My name is Curtis Sasaki. I'm part of Samsung Electronics, maybe a company you heard of. The areas that I'm focused on is the IoT space, so I have to play both moderator but also give you sort of my words of wisdom in the IoT area. I'm part of a group called Samsung Strategy and Innovation Center. We're actually based in San Jose, in Silicon Valley. So we do a couple things. We do early stage investments, late stage investments, but we also internally incubate new business concepts. IoT is one of them, which we think has incredible opportunities, not just for Samsung, but for the world. Just to give you an idea, when we introduced our IoT platform last year, we announced a water challenge for developers and makers, and we had over 400 submissions from over 25 countries of ideas of how to solve the California drought problem. I know some states probably don't have a drought. Maybe you have too much water, but to us, it's a global problem, and what we're trying to do with IoT is try to use the technology to solve some big problems, not just the next consumer electronic product, but also what are initiatives that we can drive to really begin to use technology for the greater good. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists, and they can give you a more in-depth background of their careers, also about what they're working on. We have probably a very diverse panel. There's no really common thread, maybe there is, across all of our technology spaces, but I think you'll find it interesting. And before we all leave here, I'm going to actually take a 360-degree VR photo and video of everybody in the audience, and I'll post it. So don't leave. On my left, I'm really honored to sit next to Helen Grinder. She's one of the pioneers in robotics. If you don't know Helen, I don't think you're reading the right materials. But she's been in robotics for many, many years. Probably a company you might have heard of is iRobot, which you founded in 1990. That's a long time ago.
Not too
long. Helen served as president until 2004 and was chairman until 2008. She has so many distinguished accolades. We could probably spend an hour going through them. But she was recognized as one of America's best leaders, innovator for the next century. That's pretty amazing. Demo God Award. I love that one. I remember going to demos and seeing all of the quick demo. It was pretty amazing. So maybe we'll have Helen give the background, and then I'll introduce the next panelist.
Okay. Well, I love robots, and I've had a wonderful career building companies that make robots, and iRobot was a dream come true for me because my passion is robots. And when we started iRobot, we would have been thrilled if we sold a few robots, and we ended up selling tens of millions of Roomba vacuuming robots around the world. And we built robots for the military that were credited with saving the lives of hundreds of soldiers and thousands of civilians. After iRobot, I did that for 18 years, 21 years, including my board service. But what I really like is the bringing new ideas to the world, having an idea and getting the first implementations made. So that's why I decided to do another startup called Sci-Fi Works, and Sci-Fi Works is building drones. Specifically, we have a new class of drones that are tethered, and when you tether a drone, that's a wire to the ground, you do power and communications over it, that means it's persistent, and there's many, many applications for persistent drones. So you view a facility for a time, it does communications networks, and it's really empowering because you don't have to charge the batteries every few minutes. But the one other thing that I am doing, which I'd just like to highlight here, is I'm a PAGE ambassador, Presidential Ambassador for Global Entrepreneurship. And with the administration, we're promoting entrepreneurship globally. And what I'm doing specifically is to get children, male and female, excited about technology. And the reason I chose that as my signature initiative for this Commerce Department program is because robots are like the catnip that gets kids interested in science. And when I take a robot places, kids are just naturally interested in how it works and can I build one? And you ask a bunch of kids what they want their robot to do, and there'll be a million ideas. And it's really good to have kids think of technology not as something they just buy, but something they can invent and build.
That's great. So next we have, hopefully I pronounce it correctly, Emiliano.
You're doing great.
Okay. Should I stop there? Cargomon, right?
That was close.
Close.
Most people call me EK. That's
Yeah, I saw that on your
Yeah, that's why.
He's founder and CEO of a company called Sada Logic. But Emiliano spent about 25 years founding and also building startup companies. Previously, he founded a company called Core Security Technologies, and he also founded a VC firm in the past. But I found the most interesting thing is, I don't know if it's still true, are you still trying to learn how to play a trumpet?
Yes, I'm very bad.
Maybe there's an entrepreneur who has a service for you. So why don't you give us a little bit more background and what you're working on now?
I think what's interesting is I made this jump. I come from building software companies most of my life. I started my first software company when I was 15 years old, so very young. And I built software for a long time, and then at one point I decided to make the jump. What we're building now is we're building a sensor network around the Earth. And we're doing this by building what I call the dumbest robots in the world, which are satellites. So we're putting hundreds of satellites around the Earth to take images and video and collect data and then use this data to make decisions. Satellites are really the dumbest robots because they go really fast, but they only have to deal with things over very long periods of time. So you have a lot, like between something happening to the satellite and you having to make a decision, you have a long time, right? It's not like real time for a satellite is minutes. So it's,
They don't sound dumb to me, they sound really cool.
Right. So, but it takes time. And I think what's interesting, like trying to pick a thread, I think, in this panel, I think what's really interesting for me is this convergence where, up until a while ago, maybe 10 years ago, it would have been impossible for me to actually think about building the company that I'm building today. But the fact that we can go around designing and engineering, hardware and structures and new materials, and we can prototype and we can put the things to work even in places like space, and all of this designed and simulated in computers, and it's actually done mostly by software. That, I think, opens up a completely new world to us. And I think if I have to pick a thread in this panel, I would say is this convergence, the fact that, the distance between what a sensor is and what a robot is actually, going away. We really don't know if something is a sensor or it's a robot, or we really don't know if something is, it's a piece of structural material or it actually has a function. And soon we wouldn't even know if something is, it has a material substance or it's just a projection that we're seeing. And I think this convergence, and I think it's a big thread here, and it's what's really interesting.
Great. Next, we have Sunny Dillon. He's principal and co-founder of Signia Venture Partners. So if you're still looking for some venture funding. But Sunny also did a startup, a location-based mobile startup named Barstool. I'm trying to figure out how you came up with that name, Barstool.
Interesting story for another day. Yeah.
But he's also invested in many early-stage media startups. He mentors various incubators, And when I went through some of the investments that Signia has made, it's some pretty outstanding companies. So.
Thank you. So, like he said, my name's Sunny. I'm a partner at Signia Venture Partners here in Menlo Park in San Francisco. Grew up originally in England, so I stay very close to the startup ecosystem in London. I'm very curious to see how that's going to shake out in the coming months and years now with the changes that have been announced as of yesterday. Virtual reality is kind of the reason I'm up on this panel today. Virtual and augmented and mixed, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's the evolution of where the next computing platform is going to be. Everyone has one of these, and we've seen in the short span of 8 years what Cupertino and Mountain View have been able to do for the wider world and smartphone revolution, right? Think about how much information, communications, media and entertainment, and a whole host of other enterprise applications have kind of blossomed in this ecosystem since 2008, in 8 short years. I don't think it's going to be, we're going to be seeing a revolution of that kind of scale of where we're at now in virtual reality in that kind of time period. I actually think it's going to be longer. But I do think there's going to be some nearer term applications of that. As we were discussing earlier, and as when we get the 360 video kind of camera that you have, I think there's some, right there, you're going to start seeing in Facebook, the Facebook feed already natively supports 360 video. So a whole host of cameras are going to be coming out in the new slew of smartphones that allow you to film all around you at any point in time and broadcast that live. So citizen journalism, think of applications of that. Think of your memories at your child's birthday party being able to be broadcast in a similar fashion. So I think there's a certain set of stepping stones that we're coming to for virtual reality to become mainstream. More importantly, the bigger opportunity being augmented reality, which right now most people understand to be the thing of Minority Report, and Hollywood and other movies like that, but it's surprisingly closer by than you think. Just not put into a beautiful form factor like this just yet. So I'm very excited to be here with these panelists to share my thoughts on VR as a frontier technology today.
Okay. Next, when I read Ashley is what she does, it was pretty inspiring. But it's Ashley Daradots. She's co-founder of a company called Field Ready. I'll let her explain, what got her interested in what she's doing. But I think you'll find it's pretty inspiring. So I'll just let you tell the story.
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dara Dots. It's nice to be here with these amazing panelists and learn from all of you guys. I think the common thread is really technology and exponential technology from what Silicon Valley's done, what we now have in our pockets. So I like to play with new technologies such as 3D printing in extreme environments. So as machines get cheaper, we can bring them to the other 95% of the world. So what Field Ready is we're a nonprofit, and we do disaster response. So, which means that in disaster response, we do on-demand manufacturing. So when you deploy to a disaster, you never actually know what you're gonna need. You can have your traditional go bag, but when you get there, you're like, oh, I should have brought this, or I should have had that. And so what we do is we actually create the tools that are needed right then and right there. I deploy with a 3D printer in my backpack and create on-demand medical devices and tools to fix machinery there. And so that's what Field Ready does, and why I'm here is to talk about 3D printing in extreme environments. So.
I like one of your hobbies you say. You said, in your spare time you learn medicine for remote environments.
Yeah. I just came back from spending a month doing remote medical training so that we could better design health tools in the field.
Wow. Okay, last panelist is Ramesh Raskar. He comes from MIT Media Lab, where he's an associate professor. He joined MIT from Mitsubishi Electric Research Lab back in 2008. Some of the research that I read that they're working on is pretty interesting. Computational photography, inverse problems in imaging, a lot of things you're talking about, I have no clue what they are. But human-computer interaction, which is probably a really big area. So glad you're here, and tell us more.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. And my PhD thesis was about virtual reality, and we always thought, oh, when is this going to come back?
Now.
And yeah, if you continue supporting that, I'm glad you're supporting it. And also wrote a first book on augmented reality. So it's really good to see how far we have come in that field. In my work at MIT Media Lab, my group really likes to play with light. So we like to create cameras, that can create videos at 1 trillion frames per second, fast enough to see light in motion, or cameras that can see around corners, or cameras that can see through your body without an X-ray. Playing with light, talking about virtual reality, one of the spin-outs from my group is Ayanitra, which is taking a phone that snaps into something that looks like a binocular. You look through it, click on a few buttons, play a video game for about 30 seconds, click OK, and it gives you a prescription for your eyeglasses. Your nearsightedness, your farsightedness, and astigmatism, and can also scan for your cataracts. That's kind of my first spin out, my first venture experience coming out of my lab. And then I realized that, as a professor, often we are creating solutions, looking for problems. And in the entrepreneurial world, often you have problems for which you're looking for a solution. And so we also come from a nonprofit called MIT. And I think the role we can play is really doing this, matchmaking well before a traditional entrepreneur can think about it. So nowadays, my passion is to really think about this matchmaking problem in a very unique way. And my concern is that we're actually creating a bubble of entrepreneurship, and we're getting everybody fired up about entrepreneurship, and asking them to go and solve problems of the society, but in fact, we are not creating enough of a runway before they even start to do what they want. So I'm glad we're talking about technologies, and if we have this additional runway, let's call it an internship, before you actually start your company, then truly emerging technologies will play a role in disruptive solutions that you would use for your startups. Otherwise, you would create something that you already know, maybe it's an e-commerce, maybe it's an app, something that can be built very quickly and focus on mostly on the service element, but hopefully emerging technologies will also play a role in impact on society.
Okay, I'll ask a question, and any of the panelists can volunteer to answer. But were there any technical or business transformations or convergences that you feel really enabled your area?
Should I start?
Anyone?
There are a lot of dividends we are getting. I think the mobile phone dividend is obvious. This one actually, just to use an example, this solution is possible now and not even 5-6 years ago, is only because the resolution of the display, we call it the retina display. Probably they didn't realize that by calling it a retina display, you'll make this device suitable for doing an eye test. And so, the mobile phone dividend is great, and now we're thinking about dividends in other areas, such as satellite imaging, we just talked about. And if that becomes highly commoditized, because of better imagery, I think for Helen as well, I work in cameras, and the fact that cameras can be very small, very portable in or drone or satellite platforms, these are dividends we are paying. And I feel like, all of us as entrepreneurs, as innovators, as problem solvers, we have to keep looking at those moments where you see these convergences moving ahead and see where the puck is going and not where the puck is.
I'm really interested from Helen.
Well, there's been a big change. I started working robots professionally in 1990, as you pointed out. And
Not that long ago.
At that point in time, we basically had to build everything ourselves because it didn't exist. And now I'm doing a new company, and the game has changed to open source software with open source robotic intelligence systems, autopilots and stuff, cell phone technologies that have made it so you can buy camera and positioning modules, RealSense and other three-dimensional lasers are coming on strong, and radars for automotive applications. There's just so many sensors now, it's better to incorporate them in the drone, but that's enabling for young entrepreneurs, right? Because now you can actually go and build a robot in your garage and not spend all your time hacking on the hardware and maybe get to that robot intelligence, whereas in the previous decades, people spent all their time building the hardware and they never got to some of the more interesting artificial intelligence problems.
Great. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing from Samsung in the IoT space. Just as Helen mentioned, doing hardware isn't the most easiest, but doing IoT is even more complex because you have to think about hardware, operating system, software, cloud, all the way through. And what we actually build at Samsung is these highly integrated modules. You can see here is one example. This has an 8-core processor, lots of DRAM, flash memory, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, even has video encoding and decoding, so you can hook up a camera and a display to it. Imagine if you had to design this yourself, how long it might take you. Maybe I'll get a customer.
Yeah, I'll take that.
But we've actually, hardware is one thing, but you have to build everything else out. You have to do a cloud solution to be able to take all the data that's being generated from one of these. You have to build an operating system and security. So these have like a hardware secure element to really reduce the chance of having malware or viruses. And everything's encrypted. So from the IoT space, what we've been trying to do is try to leverage the fact that there's been some convergence of technologies. I mean, you brought up mobile phones as really helping drive some of the technologies. Volumes help, right, because it drives prices down. So, and power management, but also a couple other things. How I mentioned, sensor technology is really evolving. That's also helping IoT. But also, I remember 4.5 years ago, when talking to engineers about big data, they sort of had a blank stare in their face, like, what are you talking about? But today, big data is sort of commonplace, right? You can use Hadoop, and it's open source, and there's a lot of experts now. So the next wave seems to be sort of this deep learning, algorithm development to really begin to make use of all the data that's being collected. And then the fourth big thing for us that we see is all of the wireless evolution, right? I mean, maybe using your mobile phone, but there's so much other wireless technologies that's evolving from Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, these wideband, low-power networks that's really optimal. There's LTE, Cat 0, Cat 1 technologies coming. So there's a lot of evolution in the wireless space that's going to really, I think, enable IoT devices to get out there. So what about in the satellite space? What technologies have really made it?
For us, I mean, it's a really, really clear example for us. We're building satellites that are 1,000 times less expensive than when traditional satellites were that do the same things. And literally, instead of hundreds of millions of dollars, we're building a satellite for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the reason we can do that is because we're leveraging a lot of these technologies that other people build. So we're using systems on board that are built, for commercial electronics or for laptops or mobile phones. We're using rapid manufacturing and rapid prototyping techniques. We're using all of the things to, suddenly shorten the development cycles for satellites from, things that are 10 years to maybe a few months, and reduce the cost 1,000 times, so 3 orders of magnitude. And that just creates so many new potential applications. And so we thought that was what we were doing, and suddenly this year we realized, no, what we're actually doing is, okay, we put the sensor network, but what we're actually doing now is leveraging deep learning and all the things to make sense and figure out what we're going to do with all the data that we're going to collect, which is, just human. So I think these convergences are, if you can navigate your way through these convergences, you can solve really, really big problems. I think that's what's exciting for us.
Anything, Ashley, you see in the printing space, 3D printing space?
Yeah, I think really what's making it possible for us to at FieldReady do what we do is, well, actually, since we work mostly in developing countries, it's the access to internet. So the more the big pushes to create access everywhere has really enabled us to be able to create our products and share the files internationally. So when we deploy, we actually teach locals how to make the tools and the medical devices. And so we are actually hiring locals instead of bringing in foreigners and creating jobs and teaching them new skills. So what happens with that is once the digital file is created, we then share it on the internet, so it's free to anyone in the world. So the whole open source economy, because it's not just in Haiti that people need this, people also need it in Kenya or in the Philippines. And so I'd say really just with your satellites, hopefully we can push more internet and create more access. So we can create a network of people, engineers, designers to create solutions so that people in the South can also help people in the North and create more development. And I think that it's through this sharing and through the materials science and hopefully soon an evolution in CAD would be tremendously powerful to make it easier for people to learn to create for themselves.
Sunny, what about in the virtual reality, augmented reality space?
Yeah, so I think Helen touched upon a lot of the, some of the hardware, kind of advancements in depth sensing technology, structured light sensors. So your camera in your phone is just like a regular camera, right? Like the new cameras that are coming out, that are already out in market, I think, or coming out in market this year, will have depth sensing capabilities to them. So that means three-dimensional. You're able to figure out how far something is, and you're able to figure out what it looks like, what its dimensions look like, right? So this has huge applications, I think, for mobile VR, similar to the headset. It's a similar kind of contraption in that you put your phone into it. Samsung actually has leading market share in these mobile VR headsets. I think that the sensors for these cameras are actually going to be able to make positional tracking, i.e. moving around. You take one step forward in the real world, you take one step forward in the virtual world proportionately. So when it feels it's proportionally mapped correctly, that's what creates immersion, right? That's what makes you feel like you're really there. Amongst many, many other things, but this is a real linchpin that I think is going to be essential to mobile VR taking off. Google, Samsung, Oculus, a lot of companies are working on this. Baofeng in China are working on this issue right now. Coming then to mobile, just as a whole, in terms of like the mobile dividends that we were discussing earlier, it's actually been a blessing and a curse. Blessing in that you've got a ton of folks who are already mobile savvy, and they're already trained. Apple marketing has made it us very well trained to go and buy a new $600 handset every 2 years or a year and a half. So I think people will upgrade gladly to the new depth sensing structured light sensor phones, which will be coming out into market, and will have augmented reality and virtual reality applications. And then the downside of how crowded mobile is for content developers, we've done a lot of games investing previously, on Facebook games, early mobile games, PC games, et cetera. I'm a lifelong gamer myself. So the real level of immersion that you need, that you get, from VR is coming for gamers first and foremost. They're early adopters, right, of any new technology. So given that mobile has become so crowded for a lot of app developers, I think, was it President Obama that actually spoke about Flappy Bird or this morning? That is a phenomenon. Sorry, that is an anomaly, I should say. Distribution on the App Store is very expensive. So a lot of game developers now, at the big gaming conferences around the world, the lines are out the room for virtual reality because people see it as the new saving grace for distribution. It's something new, exciting. It's a lot of gamers' dreams. People have, I don't know if you're a gamer as well, but a lot of people who have been hoping for virtual reality to come from like a science fiction perspective are now getting all that step closer, and they're financially motivated to do so because it's so hard to make money on mobile. So from a content perspective as well, I think that's another shift.
So let me ask this question. Since we have a lot of entrepreneurs and startups here, what are opportunities in your space for some of these folks out here? What would you advise them?
Oh, this in my space, robotics, it's just so many opportunities right now. I think, some of the technologies have just come to the point where it's reality to make an autonomous car, to make drone delivery systems, to automate household chores beyond vacuuming. It's just so many ways to affect the world with robotic technology. And as I mentioned, now you can start with not all the hardware, but a large part of the hardware done with, with his chipset and others that you don't have to start from scratch. You can really hit the ground running. And, I expect to see autonomous cars reasonably soon. I expect to see drone delivery, and I expect that a lot of the invention is going to come from entrepreneurs, not just the large companies.
Okay. How about in the satellite space?
In space.
Right.
I think this is really a revolution in space right now. There's really a revolution in space right now. This fact that you can suddenly build space technology for really a very small fraction of the cost that it used to take with very small teams over a short period of time. It actually makes space technology something you can do in a startup, something you can do with seed funding, something you can start in your garage. This is very unique. It is very, very new. It has less than 5 years. And I think it's going to change a lot of the ways that we relate to space services today. You know, we use a lot of space-based services in our daily life, from GPS and navigation to TV broadcasting to, you know, internet, broadband internet to satellite imaging. But the satellite services market is still relatively, if you take out, you know, I don't know, broadcasting TV is probably 70% of the satellite services market, right? It's a 160 billion market. The rest of it is still very, very mature. And there are tons and tons of opportunities for putting platforms in space right now that are less expensive around the Earth to provide services to Earth. Then, of course, there are farther out business models. So I've known people that's building companies to send things to the moon and to go mine asteroids. And those things that seem a little bit ridiculous start to make business sense when you can bring the cost of approaching those missions to something that is, you know, reasonable for private investment, and you can show that it can pay off in the next 8 years, which is roughly the point where I think we are. So lots of new opportunities there.
Ramesh, what about in your area?
Yeah, I think the reason we are all on the stage here and many of you are interested is it's not about one area. It's the convergence of many areas, as you said in the beginning. And you know, whether I'm doing research in my lab at MIT, or I'm thinking about my next spin out, or I'm working with venture capitalists to help them do due diligence on new companies, often these are things that are a combination of various technologies, and you don't know which one of those pieces of the puzzle will actually come together. And being a professor, I like to write about this. So I created this concept called idea hexagon, which is a notion that if you have a new concept like robotics or satellite imaging or VR or 3D printing, you know, what would come next? If you know X, what is next? And so you're encouraged to, you know, check online, just type idea hexagon and my name. And I think the challenge for many of us as researchers or as entrepreneurs is to realize that a technology that was used in one area for the longest time could be actually more applicable in some interesting ways somewhere else. So you can take a hammer that was used to hit some nail, but actually can be used for a new nail altogether. And other way around as well. For a given nail, a given hammer that was used, actually now you can find new hammers for it. So, and keeping kind of track of that is very challenging, of course. But those of you who are very passionate, you know, and very persistent, and think about trends that go in cycles of 20 years, virtual reality, augmented reality is an example, is something we have to keep track of. So I think I would just say everything is possible. I think the technologies are out there. You know, I think there is no distinction between a person who wants to build technology for the sake of it and a person who wants to explore the technology to make an impact in society. It's just a matter of, you know, acquiring those skills and being aware of them. So I would say everything is possible right now, and it's just a matter of how we take it forward.
Let me ask an open question, and then we'll start opening up to the audience to ask questions. You know, some of the areas we're talking about are pretty complex, technically, maybe even business-wise. Not everybody can be a rocket science in space or build drones, but people may have really great ideas. If you were to recommend to any of the entrepreneurs out here, how should they get started? Should they go into an incubator? Should they, you know, there's all these mentorship programs, there's, you know, startup houses. In your particular space, do you see any ways for people to sort of get engaged quicker and get going faster?
I've had a lot of folks that I know be successful at incubators. I think also, you know, to get to that first level, the crowdfunding platforms, if appropriate for your business, can be powerful, because instead of having to convince a venture capitalist that this is going to be the next big thing, you already show that there's a market interest, and then you raise more money for it. So that's been powerful for a lot of younger companies. I think there's also a lot of mentoring that works through the universities. When I was at MIT way back when, it was unusual. We didn't have entrepreneurship courses. Now all the major universities teach entrepreneurship, and I think that's really powerful, because it's giving kids who have that, glimmer in their eye at the tools they need and the knowledge they need to go out and start a company. And I believe one of the best times to start a company is when you're young, because you don't have to be, you can take more risks, right? Before you have a mortgage and a family, et cetera. We live in a wonderful country where if you do it and it doesn't work out, it's actually a badge of honor, not points against you for your next job. It's like, oh yeah, I tried this, and then you can move on to something else if it doesn't work out for you, or you can go on to the next idea and become a serial entrepreneur. So it's just a wonderful time in the industry to be an entrepreneur, and venture capitalists still have a lot of money, and there's so many more ways to get seed funding today than in previous times.
I actually saw some data that showed crowdfunding was only about $1 billion less than VC money.
Really, I didn't know that.
And there's a crossover point that's projected in like 1 or 2 years.
Wow.
Where crowdfunding money may actually be higher than VC money. I don't know if it's true, but I thought that was pretty interesting. Any recommendations? Yes.
I can speak to the venture capital part, right? There is so many different ways out there that you can get money. Money is a commodity, okay? It's your perseverance, your sweat, your innovation that is not. That is the thing that we are lucky to be able to stand on the sidelines and cheer you along for. So just get that very, very, straight up right at the beginning. You guys are special. VCs are a dime a dozen. Picking the right one for you is incredibly important. Same goes for a lot of these crowdfunding kind of things, right? It's just money. You're getting pre-orders, you're getting money for inventory, you're getting money to kind of validate product market fit amongst an enthusiast audience that's kind of placing early enthusiastic orders for you online. That said, when it comes to scaling your company, hiring your head of recruiting, hiring your VP of engineering, a lot of that stuff you're not going to get from crowdfunding, because it's little small checks that come from a dentist in Saskatchewan, or some a random entrepreneur that wants to give some money back to his local community. You're not getting that same level of mentorship most times. That's not to say that VC is the only place to get that. Of course it's not. Finding mentors in your community, finding mentors in your friends and family base, and starting from there and mining the network you already have and hustling your way to get to the person you need to. It's very, very accessible. Silicon Valley is a prime example of that. It's taken, 60 years, 40 years, 50 years to get here? But that doesn't mean that you are isolated. For those people that are, we're at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Wherever you are, there's communities online that you can be a part of, assuming that you are connected to the web. That's the big assumption I'm making. Get on Reddit and communicate with folks. For VR, get on Upload VR, or get on some of the TechCrunch forums. People are highly responsive. A lot of these panels, they're live cast. You can find the videos on YouTube or on Vimeo or Dailymotion, wherever you choose to go, and just reach out to people through LinkedIn, reach out to people through Twitter. You'd be surprised at how folks that are at the, that make it their point to be searching for investment opportunities, your job is to be responsive. Your job is to be a barometer for enthusiasm in the world that's out there, right? So isolationism doesn't exist in today's world. And if you feel victim to that, then you're making yourself a victim, because it's not necessary. I think there's a lot of different sources of mentorship and access to capital out there. I'm happy to talk to anyone, anytime that would like to pitch an idea too.
Okay.
So. Should we take a quick poll? Should we take a quick poll?
I want to respond to something Sunny said. First of all, you're being very humble, saying dime a dozen and so on. So but I want to kind of take a slightly contrarian view, at the same time amplify what Sunny is saying, which is, as I said, there's an entrepreneurial bubble right now, and by that I mean exactly that. People think about money, people think about mentorship, but I think that something comes well before that, and we are not focusing enough energy on that, which is, how do you make sure you're working on the right problem at all? And this is a huge challenge. I have met many of the entrepreneurs who are here, and many of you are going through this process yourself. And this is a really important problem, because in a resource-rich environment, like Silicon Valley or Boston or other places, it's fine if people are not working on the right problem. Eventually they'll figure it out, and they'll work on the problems that matter for the society, or actually are profitable. But in a situation where you don't have that, and there are few really passionate entrepreneurs, innovators, who are taking on the world and trying to learn it from online sources and so on. We do not want them to work on problems that are not of interest, or they're working on wrong problems with wrong technologies and a wrong approach. And that's the problem we have, that innovation is not entrepreneurship. Social impact is not social entrepreneurship. So to avoid that entrepreneurship bubble, I would again amplify what you're saying, which is we have to have this pre-stage well before the entrepreneurship to figure out, are we working on the right problem, so that you don't think about issues like who's your teammate, what's the equity structure, who's the CEO, who's the CTO, what's the business plan. Those things are just distractions, because if you're not working on the right problem and you haven't figured out what are the technologies you're going to use, whether they're business innovations or technological innovations or process innovations, you're just going to spend a lot of time in those phases. And there's everything else about mentorship, about how to raise funds, and how to refine your business pitch and so on is meaningless if you don't do that. Unfortunately, most of the world is stuck in this entrepreneurial bubble. And so what are we doing about it? Not just complaining about it. So we created this platform at MIT called Emerging Worlds. And our notion is that we should create a database of problems that people really need to solve in all their communities. It's an open database. Go to mitemergingworlds.com. And we host events in many parts of the world. And a lot of experts come in together and say, here are the problems in water, here are the problems in health, in education, transportation, in agriculture, and how can we solve them with technology? And then again, I think we're talking about emerging technologies here. Most entrepreneurs in many of those places just don't have exposure to this technology. We say, no, don't worry about it. Spend a year with us in an internship program. These are free programs. And use that year to figure out what you want to do. And at the end of that, talk about forming a team, thinking about equity, what should be your business plan, and so on.
That's a good point.
I think you're itching to say
Yeah,
something
I was
here.
just gonna add on that. I think I want to go back to basics here. Let's make sure there's an actual need, and you're not just using technology for technology's sake. A lot of the stuff that I do is because there's a lack of access. And what we at Field Ready do is we go to an area and we see what the user needs. That is, we work side by side with the people, we ask them what they need, we test it out, we co-design, and it turns out, oh wow, they actually want this product, they need this product, and they're actually gonna use this product that we've created. Because we went and, love your user, understand what's happening, really understand what they really need, how to approach the problem, understand their world, instead of, living in the Bay Area, it's definitely a bubble of people, I'm gonna make the hottest new app, but that app might flop next month. So how can you actually create a lasting business model is really, I think, by staying with your user, knowing your user. And the technology helps, but in some cases, it's not even the tech. It's really just about how you work with your customer over extended periods of time and how that evolves. And then your business model will evolve with your user. And I think it's also important to think about that too with technology, with the drones, we're delivering things, and with satellites, we're now aware of everything. And virtual reality, we can train people through this virtual world, and we can create internships. But it's really about all of these are kind of on their own, they're kind of taken away from the human element, right? And that's who we're trying to work with. So I think it's just really important to think about that and what you're creating solutions for. Because now we can send anything around the world, and it's incredible. So just
Okay.
thinking about that.
We're going to take your questions. This is your chance. We have 2 microphones on the side, and we have in the middle, we have a microphone as well. If you can give your name and maybe even direct your questions. But you have to go to the microphone. And if you don't mind, I'm going to do a 360 VR of your questions. How about on this side?
Hi, thanks so much for having this panel today. I'm Cece Wu with Chew on This Storytelling. We're the first storytelling series in VR. We're hosted by Altspace VR. And as a producer, I heard what you said about, Sunny, what you were saying about gaming. And this is social. And we're bringing speakers that are dealing with important issues around the world, as well as musicians and artists, and really anyone who's pursuing the creative and entrepreneurial path. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice for people who want to put together this type of content, because when people ask me, well, what's your business model? And right now it's a labor of love, which is, I'm happy to do that. It's a way to build support for people who are on this journey. So I just wonder if you have any advice for those who wish to put together content for VR.
Sure. Yeah, no, we get asked this question quite often given our games background. We're actually pretty close to a lot of the LA studios as well from the fund, through the fund. So happy to talk offline at greater depth, but at a high level. Content, people say it's a hits-driven business, right? And venture guys like platforms. They don't want to be investing in pieces of content. That's Hollywood film finance. I think venture is the biggest hits-driven business. That's, by its definition, that's what we do, right? That said, we should not, I think there's certain folks up here sometimes in the Valley that get, ideas that they're better judges of creative kind of outcomes than the guys in Hollywood, and that's where things go wrong. So assuming that you found someone as an investor that knows how to minimize the hits-driven risk part associated with content traditionally, you've had a great track record producing content in traditional non-VR formats, I think that that is a first step of kind of alleviating typical content backing concerns of venture capitalists pretty much throughout the States, actually. The best advice I can give when it comes to creative passion is just because if a VC says no, that's okay. That's one source of funding amongst many. Crowdfunding is one, angel funding is another. There's certain grants that one can apply to. And then more importantly, the headsets themselves right now. To sell their headsets, the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, PlayStation VR, et cetera, they're actually funding content themselves because they know it's people like you that are going to be there when I put the headset on, right? So happy to talk at greater depth, and give you some contacts at each of these headsets from a funding perspective as who you should be talking to. But there's money out there if you've proven a track record of success as a content producer in non-VR previously.
Thank you.
Let's move on this side.
All right. Hi, I'm Garrett. I'm an engineer from Verizon. I've got a question about your thoughts on IoT, the Internet of Things. One of the things I'm definitely noticing is that there's a lot. There's a big diversity in it. There's from something very simple to improving stuff like prescription pill tracking to whole new solutions like your refrigerator telling your car that you're low on milk and you can get new directions to go to the grocery store. So my questions are, what are your thoughts on the new, especially the new business models that are coming out of IoT? Are they really anything really novel? What are the challenges that you guys see going into the future?
Yeah, I'll give you my perspective. I mean, I have the nice role of being able to talk to a lot of startup companies. One company had a really simple idea, which is and easy to deploy. There's 160 million utility poles, light poles in the US alone, 160 million. And imagine if there was just a simple sensor that had an accelerometer, so it knows when the pole is leaning, or you put a microphone on there, it can even detect gunshot sounds. Or since we're in California, it can detect earthquake, right? It's a very simple solution to create. And then the question becomes, how do you create a mesh network so that it's tolerant to frequent outages? Hopefully not on Verizon.
No, fortunately not.
But I think that people get confused if they think IoT is just like consumer products, like you said, refrigerators and vacuum cleaners. But I think there's a lot of really simple, maybe not simple, but reasonable applications and services that can be created with very innovative business models that might not be, I'm selling devices, but it's a subscription service. So I see many of applications, smart cities, smart buildings, this water challenge we did. One of our startup companies actually created a water desalination device for agriculture, not for drinking. And they tied it to a database that basically had how much salinity each plant could tolerate before dying. So rather than keep churning and cleaning each, the water, they tied it to that database. So it's way more energy efficient and it worked.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
I think there's incredible opportunities in the IoT space. And we're trying to make it easier for developers to create those products.
True, true. So what do you think about, sorry, just one quick follow-up. So what do you think about the problems with the data sharing? Like you mentioned, like the poll situation. That's multiple, that's public safety,
Yeah.
that's utilities, that's geological information. The question becomes of how do we share the information securely? And of course, I'm working on that problem, but
Yeah.
yeah.
You bring up a very good question. I think there's probably things we in the industry, and probably all of us on stage, have to even coach Congress, right? So I'll give you a simple example. From here, if you drive up to Lake Tahoe, they have webcams along the freeway. It's grainy enough to see if there's snow, but it's not fine enough to see license plates.
Right.
So in a way, that's a simple way to maintain your privacy, and the data is all available. So the question is one of granularity, and maybe you have your own views of data sharing, how public should it be?
Oh, yeah. People, think of privacy a lot when they think of drones, but, my take on it is drones are a carrier for camera and other sensors, and you really, we've got a lot of sensors around now in cell phones and satellites and your handheld device,
Wearables.
there's so many, and if we're going to address it as a country or the world, we need to address looking at things, where it should be okay, where it's not okay, and what ground sample distance is okay, as you just mentioned with the granularity, and address it for everything, not just take it for the drones. Like, what difference does it make if you get the picture with a drone, or you get the picture with a balloon, or you get the picture with a satellite? Should you be there taking the picture is I think, the issue.
Okay.
Hi, this is a question about VR, just sort of two parts. Could you talk a little bit about, some people believe that it isn't at the point where you get a good return on investment, so some companies just don't believe yet. At what point do you think the ROI kind of justifies a more broader VR usage in the consumer space, number one? And number two, anything about the size of the headsets coming down, smaller, more compact, anything like that?
Yep, so once again, longer discussion. Happy to take it offline. The summary answer, I'll try and be brief. I'll start backwards. Ergonomic design in a way that is something very beautiful, lightweight, hygienic, that can be worn for long periods of time without creating, kind of strain on the eyes. A lot of stuff that I'm not very well versed in. That's still a ways away. There's nothing that I've seen that's been productized that has really blown me away from a headset, ergonomic design perspective. I'm still waiting for Johnny Ive at Apple to come out with their version of
we can do some designs too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Samsung's getting smaller, lighter, and faster, stronger.
I think we were ahead of Apple on at least getting VR out.
You definitely are. Yeah. In terms of consumer electronics, there's a lot of research going into it, and there's a lot that we still don't know. In terms of business model, let's take that one offline. The best investment that you can be making right now from an ROI perspective, the baseline that I have for everything, is there excellent computer vision technical expertise at the heart of some of these teams. But like I said, that's a longer answer, so I'm happy to discuss after the panel.
How about this side?
Hi, I'm Josh. I am the co-founder of a company called LightUp, and we're making an augmented reality product that we want to bring to education, actually. So this is primarily, I guess, for Ramesh and Sunny. So sorry for another question. Although I think for us, it's on the AR side specifically. Both of you I know have a depth of experience. Ramesh, I've seen a lot of the work you've done from the early days. As a small company, we have an existing product, and me and my co-founder and I have had a lot of conversation about this, and we're starting to have more and more conviction in AR, which is why we're really thinking about this next product being somewhat of a pivot in a way for us, and a risk that we're taking. But one thing that we have, fortunately, is at our disposal is sort of different levels of, I guess, AR. Like, we have a simple thing that works on cardboard, and we call it mobile AR, so it's like kind of running on a mobile platform. Then we have some demo stuff that can work with some of these earlier stage, like optical see-through, and then you have these magic, HoloLens, Magic Leap, and who knows what's coming next. I'm sort of curious on what your convictions are on sort of the rough timetable and sort of progression of these technologies. You know, the reason why I asked is that for a founder like myself, I'm curious, like, should we be spending a lot of time trying to work with what exists now? Should we be willing to take more risk on these devices that are now, you know, the dev kits cost $3,000, but eventually those will be cheaper in more people's hands? So it's a bit of a rambling question, but, you know, what's your conviction when it comes to AR in the next, you know, 1, 5, 10 years?
That's a very good question. It's always difficult to start, say, here's the technology, what can I do with it? You're going at education, which is interesting. First of all, I'm glad you read my book on augmented reality. I think, to me, you know, you can think of this at 3 layers. There's physical realism, photorealism, and functional realism. That's how it's thought about. And when it comes to gaming and certain other areas, it's functional realism and photorealism. But almost everything else in the world, we just need functional realism. That means it doesn't have to look real, it doesn't have to look function, it doesn't have to be real about how it's in the physical world, but it has to be functional. So it could be text, it could be very binary images, it doesn't have to look real, it just has to be useful. And my feeling is that in the beginning, a lot of VR and AR, other than gaming and entertainment and storytelling, would actually focus on the functional realism. And that's where the real entrepreneurial talent is going towards right now. So as long as you can focus on that, and as Sunny said, I think we're quite far away from ergonomic factors, and this is what people told me when I was doing my thesis in 1990s, and it's the same situation even today. And I think so that's why going after functional realism may be a way to hedge your bets for now.
Agreed.
I think we have time for like one question.
Okay.
Sorry.
My name is Victor Wan. We're a local venture firm. I think the question is regarding VR, AR, whether this is going to be really a new computing platform like some people claim, or it's going to be a fad or niche market. Because there's a lot of issues like eye perplex, also you have to wear a goggle, you know, all these issues. Suni mentioned that you're not going to see this to the scale of a mobile phone in the near term. So the question is really, is this going to be another $1 trillion market, or is it going to be a niche or quick faded out fad?
Sure. So I think this is like, from a history perspective, this is like the 3rd wave of VR, since Jaron Lanier and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, a lot of people have been wanting this to happen for some time. I'm of the belief that not everyone agrees with me, right? There's plenty of VCs, you know, storied VCs here in the Valley that don't believe VR is ready for venture investment yet. Given my size of fund of $100 million small, like relatively smaller fund compared to the bigger guys, it makes sense for me because there are returns, even if it's off of the expectations of where VR is going in the near term, before it actually hits to the mainstream. This is where I was saying that if you have a strong team of computer vision PhDs, for example, that is still, your downside is still protected before end user monetization eventually materializes. That team is still worth, you know, 30, 40, $50 million to Apple, to Google, to Adobe, to Autodesk, right? So I think right now in the infrastructure phase is where we're at. People are investing in things like positional tracking, gesture, hand-based input, et cetera, pupil tracking. I think content is currently being funded either by brands or by headsets or some film financiers as well as promotional content for Hollywood, you know, movies. They put out like a VR app on cardboard to kind of, or on gear to kind of promote alongside the main movie. It's about finding where the money is and understanding what your risk-reward profile is. What's like your appetite right now? If you're really in this and you're happy to go take some infrastructure bets, I think there's money to be made. If you're going in there to be backing, you know, huge, giant content bets of AAA gaming studios, for example, you got to make sure you've got the money to help those companies survive until end-user monetization arrives, which could be as far as 10 years away en masse. I think gamers will be here sooner, mobile VR will be here sooner, but the time that like eyeglasses like these are augmented reality specs is at least, I would say, a meaningful penetration of which would be at least a decade away.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, please give a hand for our panelists. Thank you very much.